Hello and welcome to Terra Solido, where we explore the stories behind the headlines. My name is Joe. Today we're unpacking a topic that often stirs heated debate: sanctions. Specifically, the impact of sanctions on Russia, but from the Russian perspective. Now, when sanctions were imposed on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine, the stated aim was clear: economic pressure. The idea was that sanctions would isolate Russia, weaken its economy, and push the Kremlin toward a change in policy. But here we are, years in, and the reality is much more complicated. Let's break it down. As you walk through a Russian shopping district today, and you'll see a strange patchwork of businesses. Some global brands have pulled out entirely, others have stayed but rebranded, a few never left in the first place. For the average Russian consumer, it's a mix of inconvenience, adaptation, and confusion. Take, for instance, the case of fast food chains, McDonald's. It made headlines when it exited Russia, but almost immediately a new chain called Vkusnaya Tochka, or Tasty Period, popped up in its place, offering a near identical menu. On the other hand, brands like Starbucks and Nike shuttered completely, leaving empty storefronts as stark reminders of the shifting economic landscape. But here's where things get interesting. Some of the biggest proponents of sanctions, countries like the United States, France, and Poland, still have numerous businesses operating in Russia. High-end fashion brands have barely skipped a beat. It's a glaring contradiction, isn't it? Sanctions are supposed to demonstrate moral clarity, but when Karl Lagerfeld, Tommy Hilfiger, L'Occitane stay open while Zara and Uniqlo close its doors, who's the message really for? Meanwhile, Japan, which has been relatively quiet on its stance towards Russia, has seen its businesses disappear entirely. It's fascinating to compare. Countries that shout the loudest about punitive measures seem to have the most economic footprints left in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And here's a question worth pondering. Why do luxury brands stay? A high-end watch store or designer boutique doesn't cater to the average Russian citizen. It caters to the elite. The people most likely to feel the effects of sanctions are the ones who used to buy affordable global brands, but now have limited options. The oligarchs and power brokers, they're still shopping, whether directly or through online intermediaries. Which brings us to the core issue. Who are sanctions really for? The idea that an average Russian citizen could walk up to President Putin and demand policy changes is absurd. Yet they're the ones shouldering the brunt of this economic war. It's a kind of collective punishment that's just not effective, but deeply unfair. And it's not just a Russian problem. Sanctions, double standards, and moral posturing are global phenomena. Considering the US, where the average citizen has no meaningful say in their government's actions abroad. How many Americans are actively consulted on the decisions that fuel violence in Palestine? Yet the US government positions itself as a global enforcer of democracy and human rights. What we're seeing is troubling inconsistency in how moral and ethical standards are applied. Sanctions are used as a tool to pressure certain governments, but they're wielded selectively. If human rights abuses were genuinely the red line, the map of sanctioned nations would look very different. The world is not black and white. Sanctions may have their place as a tool of diplomacy, but their implementations often reveals more about the power dynamics and hypocrisies of global politics than any moral high ground. As consumers, as citizens, as people engaged on or in global issues, it's up to us to ask the hard questions. Who benefits? Who suffers? And what does real accountability look like? The implications of Russia's future business landscape after sanctions are lifted could be significant but complex, depending on several factors. Here are here is an analysis of what might unfold. Economic rebuilding and investment opportunities. Reintegration into global markets. The lifting of sanctions would likely lead to a renewed flow of foreign direct investment. Many businesses that exited Russia might re-enter, particularly in sectors like energy, retail, and manufacturing, where Russia has a strong presence or significant demand. Or rebuilding supply chain. Companies in industries like technology, aviation, and automotive, which really rely on imported components, could rebuild disrupted supply chains, leading to a revitalization in these sectors. Or infrastructure development. Russia might get attractive investments in infrastructure, particularly in transportation, logistics, and renewable energy areas that could benefit from modernization and international collaboration. There will be changes in trade dynamics, trade relationships with non-Western nations. Russia's pivot to countries like China, India, and Turkey during sanctions have deepened ties. Even after sanctions are lifted, these relationships may continue to influence trade dynamics with Russia, potentially maintaining a diversified trade portfolio. Renewed Western partnerships. Well, Western nations may cautiously renew trade investment ties, particularly in sectors like energy and agriculture, where mutual economic benefits exist. There will be challenges of trust and rebuilding reputation, investor skepticism. Businesses may be hesitant to re engage due to concerns about political stability, the risk of future sanctions, and uncertainty around regulatory frameworks. Reputation management. Russia's international image may require significant rebuilding to regain trust from global partners, investors, and consumers. This is also a two-way street. And legal and policy adjustments. Russia might need to adopt reforms in governance and transparency to attract and retain global businesses. And of course, there's the evolution of domestic industries, growth of important substitution. During the sanctions period, Russia fostered local production to replace imports. These industries might continue to grow and compete with re entering foreign businesses. And then there's potential collaboration. Domestic companies that gain strength during sanctions might partner with returning global businesses, fostering joint ventures and innovation. There might be impacts on the labor market and talent, job creation. The return of businesses could generate significant employment opportunities across various sectors, particularly in urban areas like St. Petersburg and Moscow. Talent retention and development. Russia might focus on retaining its talent pool and preventing brain drain, which might have been exacerbated during the sanctions era. And then there's, of course, geopolitical implications. Global positioning. The lifting of sanctions could signify a geopolitical shift and normalization of relations with the West, altering Russia's foreign policy priorities and negotiation leverage. Russia might use the promise of market access or energy resources as leverage in future international negotiations, especially in the EU. Risks of dependency and overreach. Economic dependency, rapid reintegration into global markets might create dependencies, particularly if Russia heavily relies on Western businesses without fostering homegrown alternatives. Boom bust cycle. If the economic boom bust or the boom post sanctions aren't managed well, it could lead to inflation or over reliance on certain industries, risking economic stability and over dependence. And then, of course, the long term strategic outlook, sustainability focus. As global markets prioritize sustainability, Russia may face pressure to modernize its industries and align with global environmental and social governance standards. Innovation and diversification. The removal of sanctions could provide an opportunity for Russia to diversify its economy beyond energy exports, investing in tech, green energy, and other emerging industries. In summary, the lifting of sanctions could open up significant opportunities for Russia's economy, but realizing these benefits would require careful management of domestic industries, global relationships, and long-term strategies. The country's ability to adapt to changing global norms and rebuild trust will be key to determining the scale and scope of these implications. Thank you for tuning in to Terra Solido. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us, please. It helps a lot. Look for us with the links below for more information and the opportunity to give us feedback. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.